Put your phone down for 1 hour. Not to be productive, not to meditate. Just put it down and sit with what happens next. Most people cannot do this, not because they are weak, because what happens in the silence is the very thing the phone was preventing them from feeling. Themselves. The unfiltered experience of their own mind. And for most people, that experience has become unbearable. Not because their life is terrible, because they have run from the interior so long they have forgotten what lives there. Carl Jung spent his life studying exactly this, the flight from the self, the terror of genuine self-encounter, and what waits on the other side for the person willing to stop running. What he found was not darkness, it was the most alive, most powerful version of a human being, the one that only appears when the noise finally stops. Today we go into why the phone is the most effective escape mechanism in history, what it is helping you avoid, and what becomes possible when you finally stop avoiding it. Stay until the end, because the final lesson will make you want to put the phone down before this video is even finished. 1. Jung understood the escape mechanism before the phone existed. Carl Jung was writing about the flight from the interior in the early 20th century, long before smartphones, long before social media, long before the infinite scroll was engineered by rooms full of behavioral psychologists to be as neurologically compelling as possible. He was writing about it because the flight from the interior is not a modern problem, it is a human problem. It takes different forms in different eras. Alcohol, overwork, constant socializing, religion used as sedation rather than genuine inquiry, the relentless busyness that fills every waking hour so that the quiet never arrives. The phone is simply the most effective version of this escape mechanism ever created. More accessible than alcohol, more socially acceptable than any other addiction, available at every moment, in every location, producing a neurological response, the dopamine hit of novelty, social validation, information that the brain experiences as reward, while the soul experiences as depletion. Jung would recognize it immediately, not as a technology problem, as a psychological one. The phone is not the issue, the phone is the symptom. The issue is what the phone is being used to avoid. And Jung spent his life naming that thing with increasing precision. He called it the unconscious, the vast, ungoverned, extraordinarily rich interior territory that most people spend their entire lives carefully, expertly, exhaustingly avoiding. 2. What you are actually avoiding when you reach for the phone. Be honest about this moment. The moment just before you reach for the phone. Not the times you use it for a genuine purpose. Navigation, communication, information you actually need. The other times. The automatic times. You are waiting for something and feel the discomfort of unstructured time. You finish a task, and before the satisfaction of completion can fully land, the hand is already moving. You wake at 3 in the morning, with a thought that feels too large to sit with alone. You are in a conversation that has gone quiet, and the silence feels unbearable. You feel something, sadness, anxiety, a formless unease, and before you can identify it, the screen is already open. What is happening in all of these moments is the same thing. The interior is beginning to surface. Something from beneath the managed, curated, presented surface of your daily self is pushing upward. A feeling, a question, a memory, a fear, a desire you haven't given yourself permission to examine. And the phone, in the fraction of a second it takes to reach for it, sends it back down. This is not weakness. This is efficiency. The nervous system has learned, with extraordinary precision, that the phone produces relief from interior discomfort faster than anything else available. And so it reaches, automatically, before the conscious mind has even registered what was surfacing. Jung would call this a defense mechanism of extraordinary sophistication, not against the outside world, against the inside one. And here is what he would add, with the clinical directness that made him both respected and uncomfortable. Everything you are sending back down with that reach, every feeling, every question, every surfacing piece of your actual interior life, does not disappear. It accumulates, in the unconscious, growing more dense, more pressurized, more insistent, until it finds another way out, through anxiety that has no identifiable source, through depression that arrives without obvious cause, through the persistent, low-grade sense that your life is somehow not quite real, not quite yours, not quite the one you were supposed to be living. The phone doesn't solve the interior, it pressurizes it. 3. The self Jung was pointing toward. Here is what most people have never been told about their interior. It is not primarily dark. Yes, there is shadow. Yes, there is grief. Yes, there are the parts of yourself you suppressed because they were unwelcome, or inconvenient, or frightening. But beneath all of that, at the deepest level of the psyche that Jung spent his life mapping, there is something else entirely. He called it the self, capital S. Not the ego, the small, constructed, social self that manages daily life and maintains the performance. The self, the organizing center of the total psyche, the deep intelligence that underlies consciousness, the part of you that knows, with extraordinary precision, what you are for, what you need, and what your life is trying to become. Jung observed, across decades of clinical work with thousands of patients, that this self is not passive, it is active, it is purposeful. It is constantly trying to communicate with the conscious mind, through dreams, through symptoms, through the irrational pull toward certain things and away from others, through the persistent sense that something is calling you toward a life you have not yet lived. But it communicates in a language that requires silence to hear. Not the silence of absence, the silence of genuine interior stillness, the specific quality of quiet that arrives when you stop flooding the interior with stimulus and allow whatever is actually there to surface and be heard. This is what the phone is preventing. Not productivity, not connection, not information. The conversation with the deepest layer of yourself, the one that has been trying to reach you for years through every channel available and finding every channel blocked by the next notification. 4. What happens in the silence? The real sequence. Most people have tried to put the phone down, and most of them have lasted approximately 4 minutes before picking it back up. Not because they failed, because they didn't know what they were walking into. Here is the actual sequence of what happens when you stay in the silence long enough. The first stage is discomfort, almost immediate. The restlessness, the reaching impulse that arrives even when the phone is not in your hand. The sense that you should be doing something, checking something, producing something. The feeling that this stillness is wasteful, self-indulgent, somehow wrong. This stage is purely neurological. The brain, habituated to constant stimulus, registers its absence as a problem. It produces a mild anxiety, not because anything is actually wrong, but because the pattern has been interrupted. Most people mistake this neurological adjustment for evidence that the silence is bad for them. They pick the phone back up. The second stage, which arrives only if you stay, is surfacing. The things you have been avoiding begin to rise, not in a dramatic flood, quietly. A thought about a relationship that isn't working, a question about your direction, a feeling that has been present for weeks, without being given space to be felt, a grief, a desire, a fear with an actual name, finally arriving as something you can look at. This stage is uncomfortable in a different way, not neurological restlessness, genuine emotional contact. And again, most people who have made it this far reach for the phone, because feeling something real feels more dangerous than the mild anxiety of stage 1. The third stage, which almost nobody reaches because almost nobody stays through the first two, is what Jung spent his life trying to describe. Presence. Genuine, full, unhurried presence with your own actual interior, where the feelings that surfaced in stage 2 have been felt, not fixed, not solved, just felt, and something underneath them becomes accessible. A quality of aliveness, of genuine contact with your own experience, the specific, unmistakable sensation of being fully present in your own life rather than watching it from behind glass. And then something stranger, harder to describe. A quality of contact with something deeper than the personal. The layer Jung was always pointing toward, the one where insight arrives that you did not consciously construct, where clarity appears about questions you had given up on, where something in the interior speaks with a voice that does not quite feel like your ordinary thinking. This is what the phone is keeping you from. Not rest, not productivity. This. 5. Why it becomes addictive. Here is the thing nobody tells you about genuine interior contact. Once you have experienced it, really experienced it, not as a concept but as an actual felt reality, the phone loses something it previously had. Its pull. Not entirely, not immediately, but something shifts. Because the phone, at its neurological core, is offering a simulation of something real, the simulation of connection, without the vulnerability of genuine relationship, the simulation of stimulation, without the depth of genuine experience, the simulation of presence, without the discomfort of genuine interior contact. And simulations, Jung understood, only maintain their power while the real thing remains unknown. The person who has never tasted real food does not know what they are missing in the substitute. The person who has tasted it cannot go back to the substitute without awareness, without feeling, in every bite, the distance between what this is and what it was pretending to be. The interior, once genuinely contacted, produces something that the phone is structurally incapable of producing. The feeling of being actually alive, of being the author of your own experience rather than its passive consumer, of existing in your own life rather than processing other people's lives through a screen. This feeling, once known, becomes the thing you are addicted to. Not as a discipline, not as a practice you force yourself to maintain, as a genuine preference, a felt knowledge of what the silence holds that makes the noise feel, by comparison, thin. Jung called this the experience of the self, the specific sensation of being in contact with the deepest layer of your own reality. And once you know it, once you have sat in silence long enough to let it surface, you will spend the rest of your life finding your way back to it. Because nothing the phone offers comes close. 6. The shadow the phone feeds. There is a darker layer to this that Jung's framework makes visible. The phone does not only help you avoid the interior, it actively feeds the shadow. The shadow, Jung's term for everything you have suppressed and denied about yourself, does not only live in your depths. It finds expression through the screen. The person you present on social media, the curated, filtered, most favorable version of your experience, is not you. It is the performance of the self you wish you were, constructed for an audience whose approval you need more than you want to admit. And the gap between that performance and your actual interior life grows, over time, into something psychologically dangerous. Because every post that gets validation is reinforcing the performance rather than the person. You are being rewarded, with likes, with comments, with the neurological hit of social approval, for being the curated version rather than the real one. And the real one, unposted, unvalidated, existing only in the silence you are avoiding, begins to feel, by comparison, inadequate. This is the shadow the phone feeds. The comparison that arrives when you see someone else's curated version and measure it against your unfiltered interior. the inadequacy that grows as the gap between your performance and your reality widens. The vague but persistent sense of inauthenticity, the feeling that you are somehow not quite real, that is the inevitable psychological cost of living primarily in the performance layer. Jung's prescription for shadow is always the same. Turn toward it. Look at it directly. Give it honest attention rather than continued avoidance. In the context of the phone, this means something specific. Spend less time managing your presented self, and more time in honest contact with your actual one. The unedited, unfiltered, unposted interior that exists in the silence. 7. What becomes possible on the other side? Jung was not interested in suffering for its own sake. He was interested in transformation. And the transformation he described, the one that becomes possible when a person genuinely engages with their interior rather than continuously fleeing it, is specific and remarkable. Creativity returns. Not the performed creativity of content production. The genuine, surprising, often uncomfortable creativity of a mind that has access to its full depth. Ideas that arrive from below the conscious level. Connections between things that the surface mind would never have made. The specific quality of insight that cannot be manufactured. Only received, in the silence, from a level of the psyche that stimulus keeps permanently inaccessible. Direction clarifies. The question of what your life is for, which the phone keeps perpetually deferred through the supply of endless distraction, begins to resolve, not through analysis, through the deeper knowing that only the silence makes audible. Jung called this the voice of the self, the organizing intelligence at the center of the total psyche, which always knows, with more precision than the conscious mind, what the life needs to move toward. Relationships deepen. The person who is in genuine contact with their own interior brings something to their relationships that the phone-saturated person cannot. Actual presence, genuine attention, the capacity to be fully with another person rather than partially present, while part of the awareness is already reaching for the screen. And something harder to name, a quality of aliveness that becomes, over time, the baseline of experience, rather than the occasional exception. The sense, felt rather than thought, that you are living your actual life, rather than a simulation of it. That you are the author of your experience, rather than its passive, distracted, slightly numbed consumer. This is what Jung was pointing toward when he spoke of individuation. Not a destination, a direction. A continuous movement toward becoming more fully, more genuinely, more completely yourself. And it begins, always, in every case, with the willingness to sit in the silence long enough to hear what has been trying to reach you.